some academia to acknowledge it. And it wasn't until Dr. Curlin did that at the University of Wyoming, did a year-long study to show that the sounds were not manipulated. They were genuine. They were made at the time of recording. They were not speeded up. They were not slowed down. They were everything we knew they were, but you have to have a PhD behind that to attest to it. So he did that because he was still looking for a hoax, actually, trying to figure out how that could be. Not every day you get this kind of report coming in. Gosh, excuse me.
No problem. Now, Ron, that was back in, what did you say, 1970, what was that, when you first saw that first footprint?
1971.
Wow, 1971.
I was 20.
Yeah. And what was your impression? Describe it if you could. Was this in mud? Was this in snow? What kind of a footprint was it, and what did it look like?
It was in dirt. It was splayed. I think it was 18 inches, something like that. And, excuse me, 5 toes. It's 5 toes across. Just like a huge footprint.
Yeah.
And anyway, it was in the dirt, which was not too far from the shelter, about probably 30, 40 feet from the shelter.
Really?
And by the way, the shelter is from a group of trees that grew in a circle, wrapped cabled around it, and lay deadfall up. That's what it wasn't a cabin. It was kind of like a big beaver's nest.
Yeah.
And then we laid deadfall on top, put plastic over that, and then put alder brush on top of that. So it kind of kept us out of the rain. And that's how it began for me. And I've been looking forward studying it ever since because it was quite well. But I knew all these guys personally. When they told me the story the first time, you kind of wonder, well, yeah, what is that? And we all, anyway, we got convinced that we're dealing with a primate of some type up there that's trying to interact with us, taking our food at night, making these sounds. It wasn't until 1974, and the stuff had been going on. And when I actually recorded them, because normally they wouldn't interact with you or make their noises until you got inside the shelter. And at this time in 1974, they started interacting with my friend Bill and I when we were outside. And that's when I interacted with them, yelling back at them. We'd gotten kind of comfortable at that time, realizing they probably weren't going to eat us or anything. So we went ahead and I had pulled my recorder out of my saddlebag and started recording it. So that's my second CD that I recorded, made, produced. And it wasn't until 2008 till the cryptolinguist heard these sounds, bfr.net.org. And he came out all the way from Missouri to interview myself and Alan Berry to find out the context of some of these sounds. He said, I think there's language in the sounds. He's trained by the Navy as a cryptolinguist. He's spent 30 years doing this. He still teaches foreign languages in Missouri. Anyway, he studied them, and he says there is a language. He transcribed the language. He didn't translate anything until one comes in and tells you, ooga, ooga, there's a tree. You don't know that ooga, ooga means a tree. So he just knows that there is a language by the human definition of language. That means there's a morpheme stream, which is a group of words. They make up a sapient sentence, and they have to have the vocal mechanism like humans do to actually articulate the kind of vocalizations they're making. He says they are beyond the human range, and Dr. Curlin also established that they were outside the human range, inside the human range, and below the human range. I mean, they're all over the place with their vocal mechanism. So that accounts probably for some of the weird sounds we heard up there, which we never could establish how or what made them, other than it was probably these creatures. And it wasn't until just recently when this guy named Thinker Thunker, he's on YouTube, Thinker Thunker Sierra Sounds. And if you look at that, this guy spent a long time, but he put a 20-minute analyzation together about the Sierra Sounds. And what he says, if I can get this corroborated by a bioacoustical engineer, he says that there's five octaves in one tone. And he says that's inhumanly possible. It's just no human or no animal on this earth can do that. So if I can get that corroborated by a PhD somewhere, that's phenomenal. And because he's got quite a Nice little skit on that. If you go and look it up. Thinker Thunker Seer Sounds.
And
I
go ahead, Kevin.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say Thinker Thunker really has done a lot of really good research on Bigfoot in general, if you're interested in it. And so, some of the things he's done as far as arm lengths and the way that Patty moves and things like that are amazing. And so that gives a lot of credence to the fact that he seems to be somebody who really, does a lot of research into this. And if, one of the things that I find is interesting is that, at that point in time, it wasn't that long after Ishi, the last of the last Native American came out of the untouched Native American came out of the woods, not far from there, and
just east of Chico, the canyon there.
Yeah, but interestingly enough, nobody ever could really figure out what he was saying too much. But it is interesting that and that's one of the things that I think is kind of interesting, Ron. Whenever I listen to the sounds, and I've listened to other people's sounds, sometimes it seems like to me like it might be some lost Native American type language, dead language, but that's a theory too. But but still the idea of it not being human, by being able to track it through the vocal range of what a human can and can't do, is awesome from that standpoint, because you're definitely dealing with a creature that can make sounds, and you've actually talked about it mimicking sounds as well, as far as being able to make sounds that are very close to a sound that you wouldn't be able to hear out in the middle of the woods. I mean, especially at 8,400 feet.
Right. Yeah, they can mimic just about anything with a vocal range. They have a huge vocal range. Excuse me.
Now, this one tone that you were mentioning that was studied to have 5 octaves in the same tone, was this kind of a tone that was like a sustained sound that they studied, or was this a short tone, or how did they? What kind of a tone were they studying?
Found this all the way through several recordings, the recordings that he had access to. So it wasn't just one piece, but it was all the way through it. They were doing 5 octaves in one tone.
Oh, my. Yeah.
Establishes that pretty well. I mean, I'm impressed with him.
Definitely. Matter of fact, I'd like to have you do this for our listeners, if you could, Ron. Could you give us an idea of your first time when you heard something anomalous in the woods up there in the Sierras, and explain? You were a young man, I guess, in your 20s at that point. Can you explain what you heard and how it kind of struck you at the time back then?
Well, you hear a lot of chattering. They chatter real rapidly, like when the Osmonds said they chattered amongst themselves. Albert Osmond, his 1924 abduction by a supposedly Bigfoot family.
Oh, yes.
And we got a lot of people say they hear them chattering, but it can sound like it takes a group of guys, and I've heard this from our camp. It sounds like they're all talking at once or something. One of these things can sound like that. It's amazing what kind of sounds you hear. And you hear them arguing amongst themselves sometimes, and it's a little concerning, because you still don't know. At that time, we didn't know what we're dealing with. If it's a monster they're talking about coming in and eating you, or just what they're going to do. So we're all sitting there. We had high-powered guns with us. We that's a hunting camp. That's what we did. But even though I wasn't a hunter, I had a 44 Magnum. And we all had handguns, powerful handguns. So we was ready to shoot our way out if we had to. But that didn't seem to stop them. And we didn't shoot at them, and they didn't discontinue coming in after the food or making their noises. So we was all recording them. Al Berry got some really good recordings in 72. And we all got recorded. recordings of them. And I don't know why this last deal, if I can get the Stinker-Thunker thing corroborated out, I think that should be the smoking gun for academia, you'd think, because if you got Dr. Curlin saying that they're outside the human range or inside the human range, they can mimic vowel sounds and they can talk like we do, they can make our sounds, but yet they can go ultrasound and infrasound, looks like. We don't know for sure about that because we wasn't recording infrasound at the time, but the sound graph that he shows in his book, Man Like Monsters on Trial, which he gave his whole report in that book, and it shows graphs in there of where their vocal range is, and it's outside the human range, and yet it's also inside the human range. And then you've got the cryptolinguist he's a two-time graduate from the Defense Language Institute, and he's worked for the Navy doing just this, and he's highly qualified. I didn't know a man like that existed until he looked us up and interviewed us. But he says they have a language, and they're a complex language, not just a language. And he actually transcribed it, and we don't know what they're saying, but he knows that for a fact it is a language of some type. And if you can get Thinker-Thunker now, that corroborated, that should be all you need for academia to say these things exist. But they still think they want a body.
Yeah. Well, it's an interesting concept to think that, from that standpoint, a lot of people put the idea on what's called a mid-tarsal break. Mid-tarsal break is the way that the foot morphs whenever you're stepping off. Most people have front tarsal break, most humans, but there are a certain amount of humans that do have, about 10%. I think that basically people who are descended from that have a lot of Neanderthal DNA in them, that they actually do. Some of them have a mid-tarsal break. So, your voice recording, being outside anything that a human can reproduce, actually would seem to me to be better evidence.
You'd think, yeah, because the footprints, first of all, let me put this out there. I don't think they're all the same. I don't think they're the same genome. I think there are different types of these things out there. Some may be able to talk, some may not be able to talk. I think there's a UFO connection, a component there. I've seen strange lights up there. We've seen strange things up there that we can't account for. When you hear this big tuning fork right above your head in the daytime and you don't know what it is, just sounds like a 10-ton tuning fork. And you can't see the source of it, but it's something's making it. And we all hear that. And there's times when you don't know. I say this ball of blue light coming down one time from up there. Bill and I both did, my buddy. And it looked like the moon was falling, but controlled. It was controlled blue light, huge, very big, and it got lost behind the trees. But it was in the same time frame as these Bigfoot creatures were dealing with us too. Yeah,
it's a very interesting thing. Yeah, I've experienced that too, Ron, and so from that standpoint, I believe you that definitely when you're seeing these things, and I believe that there's more than one type of thing that we call Bigfoot too. That it's any big hairy thing has been stuck in the Bigfoot pot and tried to be rolled together and you try to separate it back out, but from the standpoint of that, so do you that, I mean, a lot of people report that type of infrasound or tuning fork or resonance that's coming from another being that basically interacts with people's bodies and makes them feel quite ill. Is that something that you guys ever experienced when you were up there, sort of a stop dead in your tracks because of a sound or vibration?
Well, at one time, Warren Johnson and I was inside the shelter when one of them was out there mouthing off one of these things, and we thought, well, we got the door right quick, and we'll see it run off. It was a bright moon, and we both jumped out there right quick and started walking up to where we thought that thing had to be behind this big tree right there. We got probably within 15 feet of that tree, and we both just got frozen in our tracks. And we don't know what to think about that, but he looked at me, and we weren't talking to each other walking up there. He said, I don't know about you, but I can't go any